So the Isaiah Factors Black Fatigue panel coming right up. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Conversations, Logic, and Reason. And as always, I want to say thank y'all for joining me today. So there's a show on Fox by the name of the Isaiah Factor. Now it's hosted by a black gentleman by the name of Isaiah Carey. I don't really watch Fox like talking about it. Really, I don't really watch TV that much like talking about it because I believe I find more value in getting my news in other sources. Not to say that I have a problem with Fox, but I just get my news from other sources. However, he hosted a panel to talk about black fatigue. Now, what's common on these panels is they'll have people on the right and they'll have people on the left. Now, the leftists on the panel were Dr. Angela Jones. Now, I think that says she was a psychologist as well as a sex therapist. And they had an activist by the name of Eugene Howard. Now, Dr. Angela Jones was asked to define what black fatigue is.
Joining us here on The Factor. First of all, let's define what black fatigue is supposed to be, Dr. Jones.
Black fatigue is supposed to be just and I'm trying to make it as short as possible. Basically, society is saying that they're tired of how black people are blaming things that have happened to us historically in the past on what's happening today. And they are also now adding different things that they have seen in society to that behavior as well. As she said, like loud mouthing or maybe, using certain words or certain behaviors in public. So that's basically the definition in a short sense.
Now, I will largely agree with her on this, on her definition of what black fatigue is. Now, she said that people are adding other issues to it, and that's because they're adding all of the other issues that people are just being fed up with black folks over. Again, right, say I just did a video on what black fatigue is. Pretty much explaining what it is and sum it all up, it's not just one thing, it's several things, such as the ghetto, everybody talks about the ghetto fatigue. I agree, a lot of people are just getting fed up with the ghetto ratchet nonsense that we see so prevalent among blacks, but then there's also the victimhood fatigue. The victimhood that we saw displayed from the two leftists on the stage. If you watch the rest of the video, and then there's the, as I say, the unaccountable fatigue. This idea of black people not wanting to be accountable for anything, just blaming all of their troubles on everybody else, nothing is their fault. And then there's the hypocrisy fatigue, Black folks wanting to say whatever they want to say about everybody else, but if as soon as somebody says something about a black person, it's racism and so on and so forth. So like I said, I largely agree with her on this point of what black fatigue is.
We get anywhere with this conversation?
No, this absolutely
Okay, good night, folks.
I mean, the thing is, it's an absolutely pointless conversation. It's like, okay, so now what? Thank you for letting us know that there's a new fancy word of you saying that you're tired of black people, and you put it on the internet, and now people are co-signing on it, including with the way the environment is already. But it's okay. You put a nice new name to it, and now you feel like it's okay to say, and it's not going to do anything for anybody to now pander this term around, to pass it on in the internet and put it in people's mouth and make people feel encouraged to say, I have black fatigue.
Well, by her logic here, then cries of white supremacy is pointless because what is it going to solve? It's going to get you nowhere. But like I said, I completely disagree with this woman here, but I would say that the real power in crying about white supremacy and racism is basically getting white people to placate to this. As long as white people placate to white supremacy, cries of white supremacy, and they bend over backwards, run around like a chicken with his head cut off every time that cries of racism for fear of being called a racist, then that's when there's power in racism. But people just aren't having it anymore. And more white folks are waking up now, and less and less white folks are walking on eggshells around the idea of fear of being called racist. And this is the whole point of the argument of black fatigue. is that get more and more people emboldened to stop being afraid of being called racist. More white folks, right? Stop being afraid of being a victim. And as less and less white people are victims, then and nobody doesn't care, then cries of racism will net you nothing. And ultimately, black folks are going to have no choice but to stop. But these black victims are going to have no choice but to stop if people don't care anymore. So to say that this argument is pointless is actually not true on her point. That's incorrect on her side.
But when we're all tired, when I'm saying all, we're all tired of something and somewhere, there's always something. So this is not actually going to help anyone psychologically, mentally, emotionally. It's only going to create more divisiveness, more anger, and more hate in society.
The only thing that black people should be tired of, or these pro-blacks should be tired of, is being victims. There's nothing to cry about in this country. There's no real white supremacy in America. There is no white supremacy in this country. That's all made up nonsense in black people's head. And as I've said, the only white supremacy that exists in the United States of America is the fact that the country is majority white. Other than that, it's all nonsense. Now, racism exists, yes. But it's not stopping anybody from achieving anything. There's no black person in America, nobody in America that's being held back from achieving anything because of racism. Yeah, it's always going to exist as long as there's different races, but racism is going to exist along with every other racism, every other ism that exists. You can take ism and throw it behind any word, and it's going to exist. However, people trying to eradicate racism and end racism is pointless. You know, it's just like, the Bible talks about the poor. The poor will always be here with us. Well, you know what? So will the racist. So trying to stamp out racism everywhere it exists is pointless. The fact is, though, racism isn't stopping anybody from achieving anything. So focusing all this energy and effort on it that's pointless. That's the thing that's really pointless.
And when we see a lot of people, especially black people, joining that chorus, saying that I'm tired of black people too, what will that do?
It's not going to do anything, because here's the thing, that black person or the black people that are on the internet saying that can go somewhere and they're going to be already stereotyped into the group that they're trying to separate themselves from just because they're black. You actually have to be around people to see their behavior. You have to witness their behavior to actually understand who they are. But she could sit there and be in a crowd of a room of black people, and guess who she's going to be included in that group as well. She's not doing anything that is going to help her or her race at this time.
All right, Angela.
Now, this is a typical scare tactic that we all often see from these pro-blacks and these black victims, is this idea that, white folks are going to stereotype all blacks. So as you're a black person, why are you a black conservative? And speaking on the view that white folks are going to stereotype you and leave you on. This is what they say all the time. Now, it's not true. Why would a white person stereotype a black person who's not being a victim as a victim? If that black person is speaking out against victimhood and is clearly not a victim, why would white folks stereotype them? Why would a white person stereotype Candace Owens or any other black person, Larry Elder, as being a black victim when they constantly speaks out against black victimhood? Now, this is, again, that scare tactic of this idea of that, when they come for everybody, when they come for black folks, they're coming for everybody. But who's coming for black folks? It's not going to come down to that. It's not going to come down to a point where people just, these white folks are in mass, just these riots coming for black folks. No, what's going to happen is, as I say, people are just going to stop placating the victimhood nonsense. White folks are going to stop having fear of being called racist. That's what's going to happen. Not these raids of white folks, these gangs of white folks just coming for black folks. That's ridiculous. But how about this? How about not start the mess in the first place with all this cries of victimhood? Especially given the fact that there is no real oppression that anyone can point to.
Eugene, let's hear from you before we have to take a break.
Man, why are we all... What does the Democrat Party have to do with black people?
Everything.
Hold on. Okay, first of all, I think he asked Eugene. So last time I checked, I'm Eugene on stage. So the Democratic Party has nothing to do with black fatigue. What the original term from the actual black community of black fatigue was after every other community decided to vote, since you want to talk politics, Donald Trump, then black folks said, we're going to sit this one out. We're going to let this thing burn down and we're going to go have a good time because we're tired. We have been struggling. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our great-great-great-great-great-grandparents have been fighting this same fight. So if you...
There's absolutely no evidence that black people set out anything. You know, black people didn't set out the 2024 presidential election. If you look at the stats, it was on par with any other year. I mean, in 2024, it estimated that about 58.7% of blacks showed up. Now it's down from 2020, which was at 63%. And of course, the highest recorded was in 2008 for Barack Obama's first year, was 65.2. But if you look at the average between 1964 and 2020, the average is anywhere from 48% to 62%. So in 2024, black people were on par on average. So what exactly did black people set out? Now, as far as this struggling, again, I've talked about this before as well, this idea that black people were struggling in the past, doesn't seem like they were struggling. Seemed like black folks were doing very well amongst themselves. And black folk were doing fine. I went over the numbers that black folks were closing the income gap with white people. And they were making great economic gains in this country up until the point in which the black community was destroyed by way of third wave feminism and the Great Society, which supported the fallout of the third wave feminism and the sexual liberation movement. But this, I would say this is seen that black people, societally speaking, was doing better in the past than we are today. But this Eugene Howard is they say he's an activist G. He's a typical pro-black that just repeats all of the same black inferiorities rhetoric. They're always talking about white supremacist rhetoric, yet all they do is speak black inferiorities rhetoric. But anyway, I'm glad this conversation is being had though, because I knew at some point in time, you know, white folks was going to get fed up with being victims and fed up with being demonized of something that they didn't do by the victims. And eventually white folks are going to say go to hell, and this is the start of it. And I've always said that, you know, white folks, if you really truly want to help black people, tell black people the truth. And the reason why I'm glad this discussion is happening is because the idea of black fatigue is the start of white people starting to tell black people the truth they need to hear. Because only the truth that people need to hear, that's the only thing that's going to make black people better, anybody better. Nobody's going to get better by telling them and feeding them lies. The lies that you hear from the pro-blacks, that the blacks are being victimized in this country and oppressed by white supremacy. Anyway, I thought this was a great panel. And, you know, like I said, this is a good example to listen to these pro-blacks, these black leftists, and let's hear their views so you can hear just how foolish they are and how full of crap they are. So, like I said, I love to see more panels like this and more of this discussion, because it's a discussion that needs to be had. Anyway, y'all, as always, until next time.